Hey, what's up? It's Tati back with another review of Season 2 of Dark Side of the Ring. This was Episode 6, The Assassination of Dino Bravo. Now, Dino was also known as the Hulk Hogan of Montreal, and he had this mentality where he thought he was untouchable in and out the ring. And unfortunately, with that mentality, that led to his untimely death on March 10th, 1993. Where when his wife and daughter came home and found him dead on his recliner in front of the TV. Until this day, his murder has been unsolved. But let's backtrack before we get into what led to his death. So Dino was probably the biggest star in international wrestling. They were in the Montreal territory. Now, he was also the co-owner, and he would make himself look good by booking him to be their top guy, which the other wrestlers there did not like. International wrestling was super popular. They would even have 2 million views watching their show. So now we're at a point where Vince McMahon is already sweeping through the territories and he's looking to recruit some of the best guys that there are. He does show some interest in Dino Bravo, but Dino is really into sticking with his territory and he wants to make it through, pushing through despite the WWF, becoming very successful. Now, one of the guys who worked at international wrestling was Jacques Rougeau, which most of you guys know as the Mountie. He knew Dino since he was 18 years old, and he wanted to be the top guy at international wrestling. However, Dino would always take the spotlight, and no one could truly get over with him calling the shots. So that was another thing where people felt like they couldn't get over. So why even be here when we can be somewhere else? So that played as an advantage for people to go to WWF if Vince was interested. So Dino was international wrestling biggest star. And then we had Hulk Hogan, that was WWF biggest star. And they were to have a match in Montreal. Now, Vince McMahon became worried once he seen exactly how popular Dino was in Montreal and knew he was way more over than Hulk Hogan. And they decided to pull the match because he didn't want to hurt Hulk Hogan's image by having someone else look better than him in a way where the crowd was more receptive towards Dino. So they pulled the plug on that. Dino was so upset about it because it was a good opportunity for both companies, more likely for international wrestling. So he decided that he didn't want to have anything to do with WWF and that he was going to focus on his promotion and, making sure that they can be able to compete with WWF. But we all know how that went. And by 1987, international wrestling had completely, had to close their doors because there was just no money coming in. Wrestlers were going to WWF. The fans stopped watching. There was something even more popular on TV. So they had no choice. Now, Dino was surprised because he didn't know what to do. All he knew was wrestling. He had no experience doing any other trade in his life. And that was a huge deal for him to want to continue wrestling. Then Vince McMahon contacts him and asks him to be part of the WWF with a $300,000 contract where that amount was guaranteed, that had nothing to do with anything as far as merchandise or any other ways that they can get money. So he knew he was guaranteed to get $300,000. And he decided to swallow his pride and join the WWF. And he had Jimmy Hart by his side as his manager. Now, with all that money, way more money that he was making with international wrestling, he decided to buy $1 million home next to his best friend in Montreal. And he lived a lavish lifestyle. He even bought a car for his daughter way before she was supposed to be even legal to drive that car, just basically flexing and just buying whatever he could because he finally had the money. And he decided that he needed to have a larger-than-life lifestyle, and that came with a price. So Vince McMahon calls Dino to his office and tells him that he needs to dye his hair blonde, that he's going to be turned heel into this anti-American, And Dino is so upset, and his wife talks about how mad he was when she was dyeing his hair blonde. He felt like that took away from his Italian roots for being blonde. Now, he is supposed to be getting more over, and unfortunately, things are dying down for him in WWF. The fans are not really receiving him well, and WWF at the time just didn't really feel like there was anything that they can do with him. And when his contract was up in 1992, they decided not to renew. And now he's at the point where he knows that the WWF was his best opportunity when it came to wrestling. No one else was going to offer him any more money at this time. So he knew that he lost his career and he lost the most income that he could possibly make in this industry. And he was worried that he wouldn't be able to provide for his family, which is understandable. Now, how does he end up providing for his family? I'll tell you. Dino had connections to the mafia, and those connections was actually part of his family. So in the Montreal area, there was a well-known mafia family, the Controni family, where his uncle was actually the leader of that mafia, and he decided that he wanted to work with them as an enforcer. So basically, if someone owed their money and they had a hard time getting money from them, Dino, he had obviously experience with wrestling, and he had that tough guy look where he can just go over there and intimidate people to get their money. If he couldn't get the money, then he'll beat him up or whatnot. So that was his role. Now the family says that they didn't know that's what he was doing. He was doing these things off to the side and making money. And I guess I'm going to say they probably knew to an extent what he was doing, because obviously they would know what he would be doing for work. And if he had to lie about what he was doing, a wife would definitely know at some point. So I do think she found out, but just let it go, because a lot of money was coming in. And obviously they did not want him to be in any trouble with the mafia, because once you're in for life. So the night that Dino died, he called Jacques and told him to come over as soon as possible. But Jacques was busy and wasn't going to make it, and told him that he will be over the next day. Then, unfortunately, by the next day, while Jacques was on his way to see Dino, he stopped at a gas station and saw the newspaper headlining that Dino was murdered at his home, where he had 4 gunshots to his body and 7 gunshots to his head. Now, back to the night where he was murdered, Dino's wife, she didn't want to go into too much details about his murder, but she did say that her and her daughter left the home at 9 p.m. They came back home at 12:30. The door was closed but not locked. She came in and she saw him on the recliner. The TV was on. She thought everything was okay until she went in front of him and saw that he was dead on the recliner. She quickly ran next door to his best friend's house and told him what happened, and they called the police. Now, looking back at the crime scene, there was no forced entry. There was no sign of struggle. He was just sitting on the recliner, even had the remote in his hand. So people were led to believe that, based off those details, that whoever was in the house, Dino knew those people. So either Dino opened the door to let them in and went and go back and sit in his chair, or these people somehow just walked into the house and Dino just stayed on his chair and talked to them. Now, there was 17 bullet casings on the ground that was found. However, they were found from 2 different guns. So it's possible that it might have been 2 different shooters, or one person with 2 different guns. And it's crazy how they would shoot him in the head 7 times. And at the funeral, he was absolutely unrecognizable. And they had an open casket funeral. I don't know why. I guess they were able to make him look the best that they possibly could. And his daughter was so scared to see him. She had no idea that it was him, because his face just didn't look like him. But she recognized his hands, and that's when it hit her that her father was gone. So the police immediately believed that this was related to the mafia. This was the third related death within 8 months in the same neighborhood. So after 3 days, they went through the home. They did find in Dino's closet that he had $55,000 in cash, and he also had $50,000 worth of contraband cigarettes. Now, I'm sure you guys are going to think, like, cigarettes? What the hell does that mean? So I had to do a little more research because the show doesn't really go into details. But during this time in Canada, they had very strict rules when it came to cigarettes. And what they did was they taxed the hell out of these cigarettes. So it became too expensive for people to buy. So now we had these mafias and these type of gangs where they would buy cigarettes from other people, and they will charge people a lower price than what you get them at the store, and they were making so much money from this. Now, one of the guys that worked with Dino was a cocaine dealer. He was actually making more money with smuggling cigarettes. So he ends up having the whole cocaine thing on the side, but the real money was made with smuggling these cigarettes. So Dino was working with other people so that he can make more money with selling these cigarettes, but then he was also working with the mafia as an enforcer. And one of these reasons is the reasons why he ended up getting killed. But the police found that there was another reason that was more likely for him to have been killed. So the police believe that they have a more logical explanation as to maybe why Dino was killed. Dino had a warehouse where he had $400,000 worth of cigarettes and cocaine. He had been dealing with the cocaine dealer, and also now there was a new guy in the picture who was actually an undercover cop. Now, he had been working with them and finding out information. So one night, Dino tells him, this was 3 days before Dino was killed. He was supposed to, the cocaine dealer is supposed to come over to the warehouse to come get his supply of coke and the cigarettes. The undercover cop already knows this, so him and the whole police squad ends up swarming in on him at the warehouse. This was 3 days before Dino was killed. Not only did they arrest the cocaine dealer, but they also took everything that was in that warehouse, $400,000 worth of stuff. Now, people suspect that his supplier was never paid in full for everything that Dino had, and most likely he was going to sell those things and pay his supplier, perhaps as he sold or in the end. So now it was either that they were going to expect all this money back from Dino, or Dino was going to have to pay for it with his life, and most likely that's probably what ended up happening. Now, the producers did reach out to the Quebec police, but they decided to decline and not be part of the show, saying that the case is technically still open. They also reached out to Rick Martel, who was very close to Dino and actually knew about his affiliation with the mafia. They wanted to get more information, but Rick wanted nothing to do with this. Rick does have one interview out there where he actually talks about Dino's ties with the mafia, and since then, Rick has never talked again about Dino's experience with the mafia. Maybe he was threatened after that interview or whatnot. I'm not entirely sure. It's unclear about that. This was a really great episode and a big eye-opener. There's a lot of people who joins the wrestling business, and once they're out, they have no idea what to do, and they might end up resulting to doing something pretty high stake, like working with the mafia. And then he branched off that to do cigarette smuggling and selling cocaine. Unfortunately, that led to his death. If he had looked for something more honorable to do so that he can take care of his family, he probably would have been around today, or at least last on Earth a lot more longer than he did. Guys, thanks so much for watching this review. I'll be back with episode 7. Bye.